The apocalypse, the day of reckoning, Armageddon. For any of these post-apocalyptic sort of series, there is always a question that comes up. What happened to the world? And for Girls' Last Tour, although for the majority of the time you are experiencing more of what these two girls encountered during their adventure, there is always that nagging question, exactly what has happened to this world? And episode 11 out of all these episodes we saw so far is probably the one that gives most information with regards to this question. Will we ever know what happened to Chi and Yu's world? Most likely not, but from the scenes that we see in episode 11, we do get some idea of what may have happened to their world. So what's up, people, and welcome to the episode 11 discussion of Girls' Last Tour. And if episode 10 was all about the feeling that one gets through the adventures that they go through, episode 11 is more about the information that their adventure provides with regards to their world. And since we have always had that question with regards to why is this world as it is, episode 11 becomes an important part of the entire series. Now, with that said, the beginning of the episode starts out with a relatively comical sort of situation. We find out that Nuko, or that little cat-like creature that they found in the end of episode 10, has joined them in their adventure. And some of the things that you see in the beginning is somewhat comical and a little bit concerning, because we see Yu trying to feed the cat, or the cat-like creature, and the things she's trying to feed are ammunition. Yes, bullets. She's trying to make this cat eat bullets, which of course alarms Chi. And what becomes even more alarming is Nuko actually swallows a whole rifle round. And this really worries Chi. But what we also find is that Nuko has been learning how to speak from the conversations it's been hearing between Chi and Yu. And we find out that it is actually Nuko who wants to eat these bullets. And in the beginning, it's somewhat comical because you see Yu getting so interested in what Nuko can eat to the point where she's trying to feed it extremely large shells. And as comical as it is a little bit concerning when you see this creature eat this material. But as you keep on going, what you find out that this is the food that Nuko can consume. Which makes you once again ask the question, what exactly is Nuko? And as we continue down this story, their adventure takes them to some very unusual locations where they see some very strange mechanical objects. And in the beginning, it's very fascinating, it's somewhat comical, and it does make you feel like you are definitely on an adventure. However, this episode takes a very sharp turn when they get to a point where they notice large objects are now starting to fall from the sky and crash down near them, which of course gets them alarmed and worry about their own safety. And they should, because what comes eventually crashing down is a giant mech robot. And so once it does finally crash down, and Chi and Yu make sure that they are safe, they eventually go to investigate this large mech structure. And it is at this point that we get another question that comes up with regards to Nuko. We know that Nuko now can consume gunpowder and very strange material, which makes it understandable that even if Chi and Yu try to look for what sort of food source Nuko had in the previous episode, it wouldn't have helped because they probably wouldn't have found any food for themselves. They would probably only find ammunition. But what we find in this part of the episode is that Nuko can actually hack itself into many of these structures. So what Nuko does is hack itself into the security device for this mech and give the two girls the ability to get into its cockpit. And once again, this raises the question, what exactly is Nuko? If this was a living creature that evolved from all of the living animals to be able to consume ammunition, that is one thing. However, it should not then be able to hack into automated machinery. And the fact that it can makes you wonder, is this a living creature or a synthesized living entity? Is it an AI that has eventually evolved into a living creature, but originally was created for some sort of purpose to be able to interface with all of these man-made machines? Now, in the previous episode, we talked about the question that comes up, what exactly is this world where Chi and you live? Because everything that you see is made for the practical. You see these huge, dark machines such as the subway that we saw in the previous chapter, which has none of the aesthetics that you would expect from a commercial subway, and it almost looks utility in origin. And you see the size of the subway, which is gigantic, the size of the elevator, which is huge, and the speed at which the elevator went up in the last episode, which was frighteningly fast. You wonder exactly what the purpose of these machines were. And now when we come back to Nuko, there is a question that comes up. Did humanity evolve to the point where they were able to make advanced machinery, so advanced that the machines took somewhat a life of its own? And unlike many of the other series that you see, where once it took artificial intelligence, it became hostile to humanity and it destroyed humanity just out of spite, maybe in this situation, it continued to do what humanity wanted, which was to automate everything. But eventually that automation and that humanity and being able to create creatures such as Nuko eventually slowly evolved humanity to the point where it was no longer necessary to exist. The automatons were able to create everything on their own, in which case nothing would be needed for aesthetics, and only things would be needed for the practical. So was the subway there to carry people, or was the subway there to carry heavy machinery? All we see throughout this entire series is really, really gigantic machines. Machines that make Chi and Yu look not like humans, but like ants crawling around in the world. And since this eventually became a war which may have been started by humanity, but may have been carried on by machinery, was the world eventually evolved to a point where it was just existing for the creation of weapons that were used to automatically fight a war regardless of whether the humans existed or not? And this becomes even more of a curiosity once Chi and Yu enter the automaton or the mech. They find out that there really isn't any comfort in being in that cockpit, and it's only made for piloting the mech. And of course, out of all the switches that are in the cockpit, the one that Yu of course finds is the one that arms and fires the weapons from the mech. And regardless of whether it's an accident, what Yu does is devastate the surrounding countryside with just one beam shot from the mech. What this gives, of course, is the sheer power that each one of these mechs had, that they could literally level a small town with just one shot. Which makes you wonder, why was such power required in this society? And what was this mech doing up until the point that it stalled? And the devastation is so huge that both Chi and Yu are in shock, and they respond to that shock in two different ways. Chi just has no words. She is absolutely shocked and bewildered by what has happened. And Yu starts cackling uncontrollably at what just happened. However, her laughing is not a laughter out of glee. You could tell that just from the insane way she was laughing. This is almost a laugh out of desperation. And what I mean by that is, have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to find a solution to a problem, and no matter how many things you try, it just doesn't work, and eventually it gets to the point where all you can do is laugh because it's like the 250th attempt at something and it fails once again, and you're just going, God, it failed again. It failed again, sort of situation. And it's that sort of feeling that you get from you. This isn't a laughter of happiness. This is almost a laughter of insanity. And it disturbs Chi so much that she finally slaps you to not only express her anger at her laughing over such devastation, but probably to bring sense back into her again. And of course, we see once Yu regains her senses that she does apologize for all the things that has just happened. But once again, as viewers, of course we are interested in the different behaviors that we see in Chi and Yu, but we come back to the same question. What exactly happened to the world that created such giant mechs, such living creatures that can hack into these giant mechs? And one last question, where are all the people? Even if there were devastation, you would expect that there would be some remnants of people, maybe bodies, maybe graves. And there was that giant grave area that they did encounter, but whenever they opened those graves, they found nothing inside except memorabilia. So what happened to the people? Was it to the point where people were once again no longer needed, the automatons started recreating everything, that it was really only the surroundings that continued to survive and the people slowly dwindled away? Or is it something that Chi notices about Nuko that reminds her of something that happened in episode 4? Where there was all these very strange statues that were erected all over the city. And when they reached something that looked like a temple or a shrine, it seemed to be worshiping these statues that looked very similar to Nuko. So did humanity create these new artificial intelligent life forms and then start worshiping them as gods? And from the chart that she saw in episode 4 that showed humanity going off into space, did the AIs assist the remaining survivors on Earth to actually go off into space to look for a new planet to live? In which case, why does Chi and Yu exist? Is Chi and Yu the remnants of the people who were left behind by this group? And if so, this is a very depressing sort of situation that we see. And so there is that question of what happened to the world in general historically, but there is also a question of how did two girls such as Chi and Yu somehow grow up to the age that they were before they had to go out into this adventure to survive. And who was that grandpa, and how were they able to survive if the world was completely not devastated, but transformed into this unsurvivable, barren, mechanical environment? I've always thought that they started this adventure because there was some sort of attack that was going on in their peaceful world, and they had to escape from it. And in the initial chapters of this series, you start feeling that because you see so many weapons. They're kind of familiar weapons, such as airplanes and guns and all this. But as you keep on going, you see some very, very unusual events. First of all, there's multiple layers of worlds upon worlds upon worlds upon worlds upon worlds. What happened to create these layers? And every place you go, it's almost really barren to the point of being mechanical. And Chi and Yu seem to be an anomaly in this entire environment. Maybe they shouldn't have existed in the first place. Maybe for whatever reason, they are one of the last living communities that they had. The community continuously dwindled down to the point where it could no longer survive by itself, and Chi and Yu were the two final children in that community that was told to go out with the remaining resources that that community had in order to find a way to survive. In which case, you could imagine an extremely dark finale for whoever was left in that community, including their grandpa. But of course, it continues to go on because as they continue to move on from this mech, they hear the signals from the radio again. And as they continue to find the source of the radio, which they find out Nuko can help, they end up inside a nuclear submarine. And this is a nuclear warhead submarine. This is a missile submarine. This isn't an attack submarine. They show you the missile silos as they're going down. And in fact, this episode ends with them exploring the inside of the submarine. And it is very interesting to see that right now they're sheltering in, again, another war machine. And in fact, all of this entire shelter that they've looked at up till now can be always associated with weapons and instruments of war. And so it does paint a very bleak picture to this world. And regardless of what happens to Chi and Yu, you start understanding that this world may have kind of self-created their own demise. And so what it does is it creates a little bit of a dread to what you expect to happen to Chi and Yu. Because if there really is a situation where the world somewhat destroyed itself, not from immediate destruction just like a war, although the war continued on and may have propelled it, but basically it slowly evolved to a point where humanity was no longer needed in this world, in which case, how are Chi and Yu going to survive? Now, the story has always been not about how they're going to survive, but what they have experienced while they have survived. And I would like to focus back on that again, because despite whatever consequences that happens to them, their life has been meaningful not only to each other, but to every viewer who has watched the series. And as such, I would like to feel that they did have meaning to their existence. And as we know, all of our lives are finite, and eventually we will meet our end. But it is not the ability to be able to live forever that is our purpose. The ability is for us to be able to feel like our life was worthwhile. And under that circumstance, regardless of what happens in the world, I would like to think that the adventures that they went through was still worthwhile to them. That they did have happiness, that they did have purpose, that they did experience the success of survival even up to this point. So whatever happens in the future, I would like to grasp onto that part and continue the series. Now, there's only one episode left, and I have heard that there are a couple of more volumes beyond this episode for the manga. So I will watch the final episode and bring up a video, and I hope you join me at that time. But at the same time, I will also look into the manga and see if there are additional pieces of information that we can get, and if we can continue to experience their adventure in the future. But that is the discussion for episode 11. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next episode, happy anime watching, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.